Good evening, everyone. My name's Diane Chen. I am the Associate Dean for Public Service and Public Interest Law here at the Law School. And I am delighted to welcome you to what is my favorite event of the year at the Law School. This is always a very meaningful evening for me, but all the more so, I would say, because of our honorees this year, Julie Sue, whom I've admired her entire career, and an amazing alumnus who also continues to inspire me every year of his career, David Owens. The last year has really gone quickly, I think, since many of us were in this room celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Levin Center and honoring the vision and the commitment and the support of John and Terry Levin. So I would like us to welcome them again, and I invite us to applaud them for their commitment and their vision. And thanks to Alexandra for being here, and congratulations on being new grandparents. We're glad that you are. We are also very fortunate to have Nancy, John, and Todd Reuben with us. As many of you know who studied loan repayment assistance programs before you decided to come to law school, the Reubens were the early benefactors of our program, and their generosity has inspired generations of law students and law graduates. So thanks so much for honoring us with your presence. Now, thinking about John and Terry, as well as our honorees and the Reubens, and the political and social realities of our times, really makes me optimistic, how's that, about the future, because they show that the power of individuals, especially when we come together to pursue a path of justice, really can't be stopped. What the Levins, the Reubens, Julie Sue, and David Owens show is that justice is not just theoretical. It's not just something that any of us study. It's made real by being personified through individual and collective acts of kindness, primarily, of hope, and of course, of courage. Justice is pursued on many fronts, but the role that a lawyer can play in advancing justice is truly unique. It is unique because of our privileged access to the halls of power, and it is unique because of the ways in which the legal system is held up within our body politic, a government of laws and not of men, as it were. Even if our cynical sides might question this idiom at this specific moment, each of us also likely has a story that comes to mind right now. Pause, right now, that can counter that cynicism, where the rule of law has prevailed. And the work of the Levin Center is motivated by these stories shared with us by our students, by our alumni, and faculty and staff colleagues about the battles that they are fighting to address inequities and to make our system of laws relevant, impactful, and responsive. I want to take a brief moment just to thank the staff of the Levin Center. I really couldn't be more proud or pleased to work with Jody Carrion, T.T. Liu, Anna Wang, Mike Nguyen, and Semi Chu, who inspire me every day and contribute so much to this law school. I want to just thank them. I'd also like us to thank the Munger catering team who help us pull off this event every year with dedication to details and to service, and just to say thank you so much. We appreciate all of your work. I also have to acknowledge our dean at her last Fall Public Service Award. Oh, excellent. Okay, never mind then, I'm not acknowledging you. We'll acknowledge you later. But your leadership has been exceptional your entire time here, and I personally could not have done my job as I have done it without you, so thank you. Just so you know what the night might look like, I am momentarily going to have the honor to introduce more fully one of the law school's best friends, Nancy Reuben, who will then introduce David Owens, who will be receiving the Reuben Public Interest Award. Then Dean McGill will step forward to introduce our National Public Service Award honoree, Julie Sue, who will deliver her keynote remarks. I've been told it's just an hour to 2. She liked Fidel Castro, she really did, and that will be the end of our program. So for those of you who were able to get to know Nancy Reuben, I'm sure that many things struck you about her. Her charm, her commitment, her absolute passion. And when the selection process was moving forward to select the honorees for tonight, we didn't know if Nancy or any of the Reubens would really be with us tonight. That she is, I think, is one of those moments of kismet, of stars aligning, because I can think of no better person, really, than Nancy to begin this evening's award presentations. And that is because she shares so many of the characteristics and the interests of our awardees. Like David, Nancy was a public school teacher with the LA Unified School District. She also has pursued policy change at every level of government and bureaucracy with great tenacity, anything that would strengthen and solidify civil rights and human rights norms. And like Julie, Nancy has committed her life to advancing the rights of those who are underrepresented, and especially to fighting for refugee women and children. Nancy has served as the former U.S. representative and ambassador to the UN Commission for Human Rights, as a commissioner on the Women's Refugee Commission, and as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. In addition, she has worked in and served as an advisor on both foreign and domestic policy during the Carter, Clinton, and Obama administrations. As I said, Nancy and Miles Reuben were the earliest generous benefactors of the law school's loan repayment assistance program, acknowledging ahead of so many others how educational debt could create obstacles to achieving the public service goals of our graduates in their legal careers. So we are eternally grateful to Nancy and Miles for their leadership and forethought in this arena in particular. And while she might not, or perhaps by now she does, identify as a public interest lawyer herself, I would posit that Nancy shares many characteristics of the best public interest lawyers I know. A willingness to challenge the status quo, a confidence in her vision of how the world should be, and a laser focus on identifying the best strategies for any particular fight that must be won to advance equality and fairness. We are so grateful that she has gifted us with her presence tonight.
So, I am the wife of Miles Reuben and the very proud mother of John and Todd Reuben, who are with me tonight, who so believe in each one of your work. We have formed, or I should say my children have formed the Miles L. Reuben Award for Public Service to advance social change in the lives of vulnerable populations in communities and on the national and international level. You in the public service community and your radiant intelligence to live our nation's principles out loud have never been needed more. Your citizenship, your humanity, it's our future. And happily, each one of you will have the personal satisfaction of going to bed each night knowing that you have lived a day full of purpose on behalf of your entire nation. Not so many can say that today. Before I get to the task at hand, I want to congratulate and honor Julie Sue, whose groundbreaking work has changed human trafficking in this state and the country. Her efforts have facilitated freedom and autonomy for countless number of women and others who fled their countries seeking a better life, only to be met by exploitation before the lawyers and organizers could partner with them and bring the force of their rights to fruition. This year, I am privileged to present the Miles L. Reuben Public Service Interest Award to David Owens. He is a 2010 graduate of the law school who concurrently earned his master's degree in philosophy and served as a public interest mentor and fellow here, as well as serving with Street Law and as co-president of the law school's Black Law Student Association. He has focused on addressing police misconduct and wrongful convictions using law to free those who should not have been imprisoned to begin with. And he seeks to help his clients find justice in a system that inherently defers to police officers. In my own human rights work, I have witnessed many ways that systemic abuse undermines the social fabric of families, communities, and nations. Where trust is shattered in those bodies and systems allegedly designed to keep us safe, it is hard to rebuild a belief in government and the rule of law. David's work has been critical in reviving those beliefs and in protecting the most marginalized. He has recognized that low-income communities are particularly vulnerable to police misconduct, and he has helped his clients find justice in a system that is often unfair. He has represented clients like Patrick Prince, who was 19 years old when he was wrongfully convicted for a murder he didn't commit. Mr. Prince was finally exonerated and released nearly 26 years later, thanks to David's work with two of his law students in the University of Chicago's Exoneration Project, a pro bono wrongful convictions project. In addition to teaching law, David is also a partner at Levin & Levin, a civil rights firm in Chicago, where his practices focus on police transgressions, First Amendment violations, and the treatment of prisoners and detainees. And more generally, his advocacy is centered on providing remedies to clients for violation of their constitutional rights, an area in which he has published academic papers as well. His role in securing high-profile settlements also empowers other victims of police abuse and power who assumed they could not hold the police accountable. The settlements send a strong message to police departments nationwide that they need to reform their systems, their policies, and practices. David, your leadership as a change agent is indispensable. Your work in Chicago and beyond brings to life the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. How often, even in places close to home, we individually and collectively fail to confer the inherent dignity, equality, and inalienable rights for all members of the human family. It is a great honor to present you with the Miles L. Reuben Award.
Hello. That was pretty moving. Just give me a second. It's really great to be back here at Stanford Law School and to accept this award that it's kind of weird to hear, to even be here, because I feel like I haven't really done anything other than try to be the people that inspired me when I was here. And, you know, I want to give thanks, of course, to the Reuben family. You know, I'm just a kid who went to public school and a single parent and all of that stuff, and the idea of coming to a place like this, and then going out into the world to not work at a big law firm is one that is very daunting for lots and lots of people, and I never had to worry about that, and that's one of the things that allowed me to sort of go on and take risks, and being a part of the Levin Center was also great. I mean, it's been, I think, 10 years, and I was here when it was established, and it was a really big and important thing, and I can tell you that from teaching at a different law school, that the support that is here and that you've provided is incredible and important and invaluable and just so amazing. So as I mentioned, I kind of feel a little bit odd about being here because I really just have strived to be like so many of my colleagues who are here, like Tommy's here, Megan is here, and also the mentors that I had at the law school who include Faye and Norm Spalding and Jeff Fisher, who I was in the clinic with, Larry Marshall, and other professors who I didn't ever have a class with, who inspired me in ways, and some of you are here who I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember thinking, I had done Teach for America. I'm so glad that there are people who are doing educational equality work and who surf, like Bill Koski. That's awesome. And so I can be a surfer attorney at law. You know, it's great. So I can do that. And Juliette Brody, and who we did have an attempt at being a surfer attorney at law, which was great. But you know, I'm not a direct services lawyer, and Deborah Rohde who is here in the ethics, and especially all of the progressive feminist lawyering that was done at a time where it wasn't, you know, no one was talking about this, and now everyone's like, oh yeah, we're paying attention now, but you've been saying it for decades, and it is inspiring to me, and it was at the time, and the same thing with Debbie Sivas, who is here. You know, I ultimately ended up not pursuing a career in environmental law, but you were my mentor, and I was a little fellow, and I went to your house, and that was inspiring to me to be able to have those opportunities. So I think for the students who are here, take advantage of those things. I, of course, left the best for last, which is my hero and mentor, and the reason that I am the lawyer that I try to be every day, and that's Pam Carlin. I think, you know, every day I practice 1983 law, and I came to this law school to basically stalk you and take all of your classes. Success. You know, the thing that I didn't understand when, you know, was how it's more than just being the best or being the smartest or writing the best things, but it's caring about people and caring about clients, and it's about empathy. And I think that is the thing that I've carried with me through to where I'm at now. I wanted to make two short comments, just more generally, because I feel so humbled and so honored to receive this award. And so I, in making those two comments, did what everyone should do. I watched Pam Carlin's graduation speech from 2009, and I'm going to tell you parts of it, because it was awesome. No, but in truth, one of the things that I think is really important about public interest work is community. And it's making time for people. There's always going to be more work. There's always going to be more things to do. But we are at our strongest when we are together. So this is inspiring. And, part of why I mentioned Professor Koski and Sivas and Brody is because they inspire me. I'm in this weird world of suing cops, and it's great for me. But there are a lot of other things that I care about that I don't have time to do. And it's so great to know that I can be a part of a community. And if there's some intersectionality between what you're doing and what I'm doing, so if I have a wrongfully convicted client who now under Miller against Alabama, because he was a juvenile without life, I can do a criminal defense and try to get less time as you can get out even while we're fighting for your innocence. There's overlap there, and I can draw on that community and be a part of that community. So the biggest thing that I think that I've learned, and one of them is to be a part of this community and how valuable it is, and to take time to invest in community, in the profession, but also with your friends and your family, and the people that you love. And that has been a really incredible thing. And so I love this. I was listening to some revolutionaries, weird stuff, and like the song starts with, it's a hardcore band. They're called Fucked Up. That's the name of the band. They're from Canada. But there's the song that is called No Pasaran. And this is, you shall not pass. And there's a quote in the song where he says, make our fight your fight. And I want to just encourage everyone here that the fight of others is also your fight. That we are all in this together, and that is what empathy is about, and that is about understanding things beyond yours. So be a specialist at what you're good at, but make others fight your fight in those small moments, even if it's not what you're doing. And I think part of this also realizes that we are standing on the shoulders of those who came before us, and I feel really lucky. I clerked in Alabama with Judge Myron Thompson, and there I met this man named Fred Gray, who's a civil rights attorney in the 50s and 60s when people were crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge and being attacked. And that seems very far away, though it doesn't. I had a civil rights case trial that I did a couple months ago that was exactly Brown. But the Fred Gray, the attorney, allowed us to be in a point in our society where Freddie Gray's life matters in Baltimore. And when he's doing this work that is really, really hard, and it seems like, how can we ever overcome racism? How can we ever desegregate the schools? That somehow means something for who Freddie Gray is that everybody in this room knows that there's a kid who is in a police van who died because they abused him. And no one would care about that 10 years ago. And there was lots of opportunities to be overwhelmed and depressed and feel like none of these things matter. But they do, and they matter in individual cases. They matter for each individual client you have. And so that is where we're at. And I think there's a lot of mention and there's a lot of overtones about where the world is heading, and it's frankly can be overwhelming, and it can be very depressing. And it can be easy to say, oh, well, everything's screwed. There's a fascist Nazi who's the attorney general, so it's over. But it's not. And so he's racist. I mean, it's like so bad. But like, but actually it turns out, and Nancy, I thank you so much for your comments, is that in individual cases, we can do particular things for our clients and for others. In helping one person, you actually help more than that one person. And so, just one little lawsuit, I think about my client, Patrick Prince, who you mentioned, and I think about the things that has changed in the state's attorney's office about this particular police officer. And this is Cook County in Chicago. So I think when things get tough, the tough get going. That is a thing, and it sounds cliche, but that's what we're here to do, is be the best attorney. Be the one who knows the cases, who knows everything about all of the things, so that when you're there, that you are in charge, and that is where the power is. The power is in knowledge and in being better and in this community of which I am humbly a part of, and thank you so much for this award.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for those wonderful remarks, David, and Nancy for that fantastic introduction, and the Reuben family for your support of the law school and this award, and allowing us to recognize David for his incredible work. So speaking of your mentor, Pam, David, she wanted me to acknowledge that she's not at all surprised that you ended up teaching, because she remembers your dedicated and talented surfing. And that she, Viola, and Juliet benefited from your teaching. Having bought the surfing lesson you donated to the Spilf auction, I think we heard some tonight about the success of your students in that enterprise, so maybe we can talk about that later. But yes, fun was had, that's good. I also want to welcome John and Terry and Alexandra tonight, and to acknowledge the leadership and generosity that you have provided and given to the law school. Our pro bono, our public interest program, our public service students, that's all made possible by the vision that you all had and what you contributed to the Levin Center, your support of it, your advice, and the idea that we should be instilling in all of our students a commitment to service over the course of their careers and creating opportunities and resources for them to pursue that. So thank you very much. We are very grateful. 11 years and counting. So thank you. I get to introduce Julie Sue, but before I do so, every year I have a little game of, I don't know what it's called, with Diane, which is that she acknowledges everyone except herself. And I guess in my last year as dean in this role, I can say, let's acknowledge and thank Diane for her leadership and vision. I'm in trouble with Diane, just FYI. So it's a real pleasure to get to introduce California's Labor Commissioner, Julie Sue, and present to her the law school's National Public Service Award. I'm going to say a bit about her career. I'm just going to say a bit because I want you to hear from Julie. And I could, if I allowed myself to go on and on about her incredible career and her devotion to the public good and her success in improving the public good. But let me just tell you a few things about her. Prior to being appointed the Labor Commissioner by Governor Jerry Brown in 2011, Julie served as a litigation director at Advising Justice LA, the largest nonprofit civil rights organization dedicated to serving the Asian American community. She began her time there as a Skadden Fellow, and it was early in her time at what was then called the Asian Pacific American Legal Center that she would be brought into a case representing workers trafficked from Thailand and Latino workers in El Monte, California. That case would change the law that applied to employers and manufacturers whose exploitation of workers through sweatshops and trafficking, establishing liability for those who sought to avoid that liability and ignore what they were doing by the use of subcontracting. As Julie has written about the case, it just as importantly changed her own approach to serving others as a lawyer. Soon thereafter, she was recognized for her pioneering work with the MacArthur Foundation Award. A graduate of Stanford and Harvard Law School, as Labor Commissioner of California, she has expanded the vision of what the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement could do to support workers, launching an innovative campaign to address wage theft, the creation of a new criminal investigation unit, and an exhaustive change in the way the division conducts workplace investigations. In any given year, her department can receive upwards of 35,000 individual wage claims by workers who are not paid proper wages or where workplaces violated other labor laws. She was at first hesitant to take on this role in government and to leave her advocacy. But it's clear what her vision and her experience as an advocate working directly with and for workers has produced. As a public interest lawyer, she advocated for the labor commissioner to take more seriously the experiences of low-wage workers, of immigrant workers, of single mothers who worked, and of other underrepresented groups who could benefit from more aggressive and more even-handed enforcement of the laws designed to protect them. The article she wrote about the El Monte case, which, by the way, Diane assigns every year in her public interest seminar, was appropriately entitled "Making the Invisible Visible: The Garment Industry's Dirty Laundry." Now, she has created an enforcement agency that not only sees all of these workers, but is a stalwart partner and a supporter to exactly those most vulnerable workers in the state of California. It's for that and for her long history of advocacy, her inspiring model as a public servant, and her dedication to social justice for all in every arena that we are honored to present her with the National Public Service Award. I'm not going to take your speech.
Okay, thank you. Although I'm now wishing I had asked Pam Carlin for her 2009 graduation speech, but wow, thank you so much. It's really so nice to be back at Stanford, where I spent 4 years. And then I went for 3 years to a different law school and wished I was still at Stanford. But I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for the warm welcome. When Dean McGill first reached out to me about this award, I said, really, me? And so I'm really touched and honored to get something so prestigious and to be here among so many old friends and new friends. I do want to acknowledge Diane Chen, who is both a friend and a sister. And I will just say that for those of us who've been doing public interest law, Diane paved the way even long before she was given this incredible platform to do it here at Stanford. So there is a whole generation or two now of public interest lawyers who we owe our path to Diane's guidance and her generosity. So I just want to pause for a moment and say to David Owens, wow, David Owens. And I'd like to have a beef with Diane about putting me after him also. So I, like anybody of conscience, read about and think about and agonize over the things that you talk about. And now, every single day, I can not only agonize, but I will think about you and the incredible work that you do and have something to cheer about in that really horrific world in which so many people are being dehumanized and killed, and I really amazed that I'm sharing a stage with you tonight. So, so to become the California Labor Commissioner, I had to be confirmed by the California Senate. And so before that confirmation hearing, I did my rounds meeting with the Rules Committee. And on one day, I went to meet with the senior Republican member of the committee, and I walked into his office in the Capitol. And when I got there, he said, sit down. So I sat down, and he had a piece of paper in his hands, and he said, I want to read you something. And he read, Julie Su has been a fierce advocate for workers' rights and civil rights her entire career. This appointment will just let her take her ass kicking to a whole other level. Right? That was my reaction. He was not laughing at all. And so he threw the paper on his desk and sternly looked at me and said, so I need to know, are you going to kick ass or be fair? Now, I don't remember what I said in response to that question, but before I even exited the Capitol, I had a call from the governor's office saying, what did you say? He's going to vote no, and now the other Republican's going to vote no, and now your appointment is kind of in jeopardy. So I share that because, one, I obviously was confirmed, so there's no tension in the story there. But, in addition to him clearly wanting me to disavow my past and my work as a civil rights lawyer and my time advocating for low-wage workers, I think the senator's comment turned out to be not too out of step with the way many people view my position. And I call it the myth of neutrality, the idea that it's a mindset that really plagued my agency from the inside and the outside. And it's the idea that we're not supposed to take sides. So one of the first things I did when I became labor commissioner was to be very clear that we are not a neutral agency, that we must be impartial in our adjudication and unbiased in our investigations, but we're not neutral about what kinds of conditions should exist in every workplace. We're not neutral about what happens to a worker who has to go to work full-time year-round and still live in poverty because the employer stole the wages that she had earned. We are on the side of the law. And that means that we're on the side of employers who play by the rules and on the side of employees whose rights have been violated. Many employers who are caught breaking the law are quick to charge us with being unfair. They'll say, "You're not on my side." And my response to that is, I'm not supposed to be. So to give an example of this, I just want to talk about a group of workers who filed claims with my office. These are port truck drivers. So these are drivers who haul cargo from the ports in California to the warehouses where they drop things off, to the stores where they're going to be sold to the public. And most of these workers work 14, 15 hours a day. And they are classified as independent contractors, part of our contingent economy. So that means that they end up paying for to lease their truck. They pay for the maintenance, the gas, the insurance, the costs of doing their work. And what happens is many of them end up working for pay they're paying for work instead of working for pay. So over 1,000 of those truck drivers have filed wage claims with my office. An incredibly courageous thing to do in light of the fierce retaliation that many of them face and how close to the edge most of them live. And we have adjudicated a little over half of them, and what our job is to determine whether they were actually employees or independent contractors. And in the hearings that we've done, we have found employee status in those cases, and we have ordered over $50 million to be paid to these port truck drivers. But the response from the trucking industry is really interesting. It's been a full-scale attack, not only on the results of these individual cases, but on the very authority of the labor commissioner to adjudicate these claims. They've said in state and federal court that we are acting outside of our authority. They have pushed politically, I've been called to more meetings than I can count in the governor's office, to foreclose access to them to this method of relief. And I've been told numerous times that the policy of accepting these claims runs contrary to that of prior administrations. One argument goes like this: misclassification is just too complicated for the labor commissioner. It's too difficult, and so we should allow those cases to go to court. And the basis for all these arguments, sometimes it's explicit, sometimes it's implicit, is the idea that accepting these cases evinces a sort of bias that's unseemly for the government. And our decisions, the outcomes in favor of these drivers just confirms that bias. These companies argue that we are not being fair because if we were fair, then at least some of the cases, some have actually said roughly half of them, should come out in favor of the companies. Right. This is Stanford Law School, so that is your reaction. That was mine too. And so I think that mindset is part of the problem, right? It's the idea that government neutrality is routinely equated with fairness. But in fact, they're not the same thing. We must aspire to be fair in all of our work. I have learned the need to repeat that. But we are not neutral about the outcome of cases. It is our job, it is our duty to enforce our mandate to make sure the law is meaningful and real in every workplace in California. And in industries where there are rampant and systemic violations, the fair outcome may very well be decisions that all go one way in favor of workers whose rights have been violated. So this example of one group of workers in one particular industry is a reminder that the choices that are made by the labor commissioner make a really big difference. This is to David's point that what we do each day, it does matter in individual decisions, in hundreds of thousands of decisions that we make about how we're going to operate and what we're going to do. And as a result of all these cases, the governor just signed a law that will go into effect on January 1 that says that now the customers whose cargo is being shipped, right, who's being driven by these drivers, the Walmarts, the Targets, that they can be held responsible now for wage theft if they contract with a known wage thief in order to ship the goods. That was policy change that we worked toward. And while most companies close down soon after we issue a judgment in their favor, and for the first few years of this work, that's what they did. They closed down, they opened up under a new name. Last Thursday, we got a cashier's check in my office for $12,000 for one individual driver. And the week before that, we got a cashier's check for $125,000 for one individual driver. So when we're told that prior administrations would not have done these cases, I take that not as a criticism, but as a compliment. And rather than running away from the hard things, the tough cases, we should be doing everything we can to make sure we get them right. So in government, the decisions about who gets access and where we will prioritize our limited resources are far from neutral. In 2014, the US Department of Labor did a study that found that 1 in 10 low-wage workers in California is not paid the minimum wage. Or put another way, the California minimum wage is violated 372,000 times per week. Despite this, the labor commissioner in the past was not focused on combating wage theft. In fact, they subscribed to the theory that inspections were too hard a way to ferret out wage theft, and workers were too vulnerable to speak out or to tell us what was going on. And so they conducted random inspections of workplaces. They would walk into a place, demand records on the spot, interview employees under the nose of their employer, and after half an hour or an hour, they would leave, usually not finding anything. And perversely, this was used to prove that there weren't a lot of violations going on in California workplaces. In fact, when these same workers would turn around and then call the deputies, call the labor commissioner's office and say, oh, you came to my workplace, you did an inspection. I couldn't tell you at the time because my employer was watching. I couldn't tell you about the false set of time cards or the work off the book that I have to do. The response would be, well, you're not so credible because you lied to me the first time. So you can all understand why the approach to investigations was left something to be desired. So now we have completely changed the way we do investigations. Instead of random inspections, we use data and intelligence gathering, and we have partnerships with community-based organizations who work in communities, who have the trust of communities to bring cases forward to us, and those we prioritize as good targets. And basically, the idea is that we strategize about which cases we can take that's going to have as much an impact as possible, right? It's exactly the way civil rights lawyers think about the work that we do, because we're not going to be able to do every case, so let's be smart about what we choose. As a result, just in the last 6 months, I'm going to share a few of the results of this method of prioritization. So we issued over $10 million in citations against 7 restaurants all in the Bay Area that had exploited 431 workers by paying them a weekly pay rate without regard to overtime work. We also cited the Cheesecake Factory for $4.5 million for using over 500 janitors that they hired through a contractor but did not pay for all their hours worked. So these janitors would come and clean the restaurant from midnight to 8 a.m. At the end of their shift, the restaurant manager would come and do a walkthrough and then ask them to fix things, change things, make things cleaner, and all that work was not paid for. And so we cited not just the contractor, but also the Cheesecake Factory. And this case illustrates a really common wage theft problem, which is, as Dean Miguel already mentioned, the idea that we have subcontracting, and this happens not just in janitorial, but in construction and agriculture, right, where the person who benefits the most from the labor insulates themselves from responsibility for it. And so our enforcement sends a really clear message that up-the-chain businesses can no longer hide behind their contractors and shield themselves from liability for wage theft. And we cited a residential care facility for $7 million for having about 150 workers who slept on site, and their pay turned out to be about $2.40 an hour. So yes, these investigations are demanding, and yes, these workers are scared. But I've learned from all of the workers that I've been so privileged to represent in my career that it's usually not their fear that stops us. It's usually ours. And so I also want to say one thing about Stanford and about Dean McGill in particular. I just learned about this Law and Policy Lab, and so I would like to join it, maybe for a semester. Because one of the things that I've really tried to prioritize is legislative change. And I would have avoided a lot of dumb mistakes if I'd been in the lab, I believe. But as everyone from second grade on knows, right, there's the executive branch which enforces the laws, there's the legislative branch that passes laws. And so when I first started getting into saying, hey, we should have some laws that do this, I was told to stay in your lane. That's not your job. Wait until we pass the laws, then you get to enforce them. But it's not enough to wait for the legislature to write laws that they might not have familiarity with or not have thought about whether they're going to be enforceable or not have thought whether they're going to be internally consistent with other sections of the labor code. All these things do happen. And so we've really worked hard to strengthen the laws also to give us both more powers to enforce, but also to raise protections that we see as needed because we're on the front lines of seeing what goes on in workplaces. So we've done things like increase protections for immigrant workers, right? Increase protections for workers from retaliation, making a presumption that if there's an immigration-based threat, that is a presumptively retaliatory act. In fact, in all of 2016, we had 19 cases of immigration-based retaliation, right? Employer says to their employee, if you report me, I'm reporting you to ICE. If you bring a claim against me, if you cooperate with the labor commissioner, I am going to have you and your family deported, right? Those kinds of threats. We had 19 in 2016. In 2017, we had 90. Not an accident, right? Not an accident based on what else was going on in the country, but also we know that not every worker who suffers some kind of abuse or exploitation is going to report. So most of our data I consider to be an undercount of exactly how bad the problem is. And then I already mentioned that we've worked on legislation to effectuate more up-the-chain liability so that we can change corporate behavior and not just go after the middlemen. And so there's many, many ways to change the law, right? And I think that for me, when I think about the choices that I've made that brought me here, I would be absolutely delusional to say that I knew what I wanted to do and then had a plan for getting there. Growing up, I didn't know a single lawyer. I didn't really even know what lawyers did. But I did grow up translating for my parents, right? I translated basic things. I translated letters that came in the mail and returned phone calls for them. And I realized how powerful language is. And as I grew up, I increasingly understood that law is a language, and it's the language of power. And those who speak it get to decide who gets what in our society. Who gets to speak, who gets to vote, who gets to immigrate, to marry, to work. And so I went to law school to become a translator in the language of law for those who were marginalized and excluded and discriminated against. But by my third year in law school, I had all but lost hope that that was a possible path. So I applied for a Skadden Fellowship after talking myself out of it at least a dozen times. And with the Skadden, I worked at a nonprofit organization now called Asian Americans Advancing Justice, and it began as a 2-year stint and turned into 17 years. So it is a sign that you never really know where your path is going to take you. And I'm actually really loath to give advice because I think that there are many, many ways to get to where we each want to go. But I will say one thing about working with or in a public interest organization. I think it's an unparalleled training ground. And this is because you never have enough resources, you are always outmanned and outgunned, and you don't have the luxury of time. And so you learn how to outsmart and outwork the other side. It's also an astounding place where you are not only allowed to be creative, you are required to be creative to be successful. And you can't worry about staying in your lane, right? We just can't afford to do that. And so it's not enough to just do direct legal service work. You need to also understand the power in litigation and bringing corporations and government entities to the table and raising the stakes. And it's not enough to do that either. You have to learn how to change policy and work in the legislative arena and do outreach and education and work alongside communities who are most impacted by the work that we do. And it became so ingrained to think in that way that pretty much everything that public interest lawyers end up doing is you think about how you break down barriers and how do you solve every problem that comes your way. And because you get to work with people who are so passionate, who share a common sense of mission with you, you build a camaraderie which, like we feel here in this room, will help carry you through even on the cases that you don't win. And finally, I learned that translating is not just about teaching marginalized communities the language of the law. It's also about making the law big enough and bold enough and just enough to speak the language of marginalized communities. So I brought all of these lessons into my job in government. And one of the first things I did was adopt a mission statement for the Labor Commissioner's Office. I just wanted to make sure, coming from a world where that was really fundamental to how everyone knew why we existed, I thought it was important for my agency to know what we existed to do and what we stand for. So the mission of the California Labor Commissioner's Office now says that we exist to ensure a just day's pay in every workplace and to promote economic justice and to combat wage theft. And our mission statement is now printed on the back of all of our business cards. It's infused in all of our policies and in our trainings, and it helps to make sure that we stick to something. There's some guiding principle on which we can make the hundreds of thousands of decisions that everyone needs to make each day. I frankly found it baffling that an agency that large could operate without some guiding principle like that. And that also comes from my time working in a nonprofit civil rights organization. But to be honest, when Governor Brown first came to ask me if I wanted to be labor commissioner, I didn't want to do that job. I liked fighting against the man. I didn't want to be the man. So in my first conversation for the job, I was asked, why do you want to be the labor commissioner? And I think I said, I don't know if I want to be the labor commissioner. I don't recommend that as an interview technique, but I will say that one way that I think it helped was that I came in with a very clear statement about what I wanted to do, and I think for those of us with a public interest mind, it's important that wherever you take your tremendous talent, that you're clear about what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. And so, again, when he came back and asked me to do the job, I said again, like I said to Dean McGill, really? Me? And I had worked in a relatively small nonprofit organization compared to this state agency of over 500 employees in 18 offices across the state. So I'm just going to close by saying that these decisions about where you take your talent and where you put the tremendous privilege of your Stanford law degree are not easy ones, especially today when so much about the law, right, from legislation to the judiciary, from politics to law enforcement, it's downright depressing. But I learned something many years after I finished law school that I wish I had known when I was there. And that is that the law is not inevitable. The doctrines that you study, the cases that you read, the laws that are passed, they weren't just meant to be. They are the result of hundreds of thousands of decisions made by individuals, mostly lawyers, but not only lawyers. And the decisions are made in the legislature, in the courtrooms, but they're also made just by advocates in the decisions about who to represent and what claims to pursue. They're made by law professors about what classes to teach and what possibilities to imagine. And they're made by organizers about how to exercise their power and the power of the people. They're made by all of us about which laws we want to bring to life and whose issues are worthy of our attention and how hard we're willing to push to make things better. So, if you want to spend your career fighting for justice, but you're kind of like me, saying, really, me? Then I just wanted to say very strongly from this incredible position that you've given me to stand here in front of you, yes, yes you, yes us, yes all of us. We all need to do this work. So in California, I'm often asked about this, right? Like, how does it feel to be in California at a time when the rest of the country seems to be, I don't know how to put this nicely in a room that's so nice. how does it feel to be part of a state that is still doing positive things and passing good laws and prizes enforcement, has a Supreme Court who cares about the poor, the disenfranchised? What is that like? How does it feel to be in California where we talk about sanctuary, right? Are we going to be a sanctuary state? Do we have sanctuary schools? What's a sanctuary city, and how do we expand them? So I just want to close with this one comment, which is that I find, most of that talk of sanctuary is in the context of sanctuary from deportation and sanctuary from detention. But I think that we should be talking about sanctuary from a much broader perspective, right? We should be talking about sanctuary from poverty, from injustice, sanctuary from declining wages and racism and sexism and homophobia and exploitation. And that's the kind of narrative that we want to focus on as the public interest legal community, armed with all the tools you're armed with the language that you now speak. Because you don't have to choose between kicking ass and being fair. You can do both, and you can do even more. So thank you so much, again, for having me, and thank you for this incredible award.